Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 10th episode of XENA Star Salon and Chat Show with me, your host, Kapil Deev. Today, on the XENA Star Salon Chat Show, we have an interesting personality, a research scholar, somebody who's working on the laser technology, and all the way from London, Rajeev Pattathil. How are you, Rajiv ji?
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Did I get your name right?
Yeah, almost, except
Okay.
for the last bit, but I'll take it.
Yeah.
I think your pronunciation is much better than what I've heard before. So,
So, of course, I'm a Telugu, and as a dialect that we have our own, and Malayalam has got its own dialect. So, Malayalamanu korchu korchu is what
that's
I
right.
can
We'll get
Uh,
by.
yeah, get by, and a wonderful food and wonderful state of Kerala that you come from, and talk us through your journey from Kerala to all the way to Oxford in London.
Of course. Yeah, so as you say, I mean, Kerala is a really beautiful state. I mean, so is actually Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. I've been there several times. So I've spent time in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana as well. So I loved those places as well. So I'm from a little village in a district called Palkad. So Palkad has obviously a lot of personalities. I think most people would have heard of T.N. Sheshan. So, and of course
Election
now,
former election commissioner is from your place?
yeah. So
Oh,
he used to be
interesting.
a Palakadian, and now Shashi Tharoor.
Oh,
So he's also from Palakkad. So
but he's contested from Thiruvananthapuram.
that's
So,
right. Yeah, yeah. But his ancestral home is actually in Palakkad.
oh, okay, okay.
Not very close, I would claim. But one.
But they get it all. Palakkadians are very intelligent people.
Yeah, so it's a very very quiet, very tranquil village called Sri Krishnapuram. That's where I was born. My parents were teachers in local school. That's where I studied. Till my 10th, I studied in the local school, completely in Malayalam medium, and then switched to at those times, plus two. Was just being introduced, you still most people used to still go to college for what used to be called pre-degree,
Okay,
and
okay.
so this is basically equivalent to plus two, but done in a college setting rather than in a school setting. And then after my plus two equivalent in a college, I did bachelor's in physics. It's during plus two time that I actually got interested in science, and I started seriously thinking about science, and I didn't really want to go into the usual route that Indian kids take,
Were your
engineering
parents
or
an influence for you to get into science? Because as you have spoken about, they being teachers, a teacher's sons or children usually are brought up in a different way, in a different discipline altogether, and books become a priority, and
yeah,
obviously reading becomes a priority.
yeah.
So, was science always there in your head when you were growing up?
Yeah, science was always there. As in, I liked the logical way of thinking from beginning. I was, I was quite studious. I wouldn't lie. So I used to like reading, and I was a single child, so I didn't have brothers or sisters.
You
Um,
lonely child.
yeah, so that kind of meant that I used to play, but since I didn't have any siblings, most of my time actually used to be with books, unfortunately. So that kind of imbibed that reading quality in me somehow. That kind of carried on for a while, and I think at that time the school syllabus used to have chapters about famous scientists, what they've done for the country, and such like. So these things were in the back of my mind, but I never really got that level of interest in science until I did my plus two level. So that's when I things that you learn in school are you basically learn a lot of facts. You learn a lot of superficial things. But
Right.
I think in the +2 level, at least in my case, there was a huge transition. That's when you start looking at mathematics seriously and understand that mathematics is, or somewhat advanced mathematics is kind of a prerequisite to doing serious science. So that initially was difficult for me. I almost almost failed in my first exam. In the +2, part of the problem was language as well, because
You
I was
transitioned
gotten.
from Malayalam medium to English medium.
Yeah. That's a huge transition. So most of the terminology was
But
very
now
different.
look where you ended up in land of English.
Yeah, I mean that's the irony of it.
Contrast to how you began, and now it's all in English street that you are
Yeah,
living
indeed. So, so that almost. I mean, I scraped through, but it was just barely. That kind of was the wake up calls, and that kind of was the first time I was below average in something, and that kind of shook me a bit. So I started actually looking at some of these things a bit more seriously, started reading around the syllabus, not just the syllabus. So that kind of grew my interest in science in a way. So I think by the time I finished my +2, I was quite certain that I really wanted to do in the science field. And so then I did my graduation again in a college, not well, not very far from my home, same district, and did my bachelor's there. And after that, it wasn't. So I was actually quite good. So my results were much better for my bachelor's. I think I was maybe within 10 ranks or something like this within the university. So that part was very good. So I was then seriously thinking about doing a PhD. So I was basically looking around where to do this. Obviously, you have to do masters as well. Some places used to do at that time integrated PhD. So IISc was an option.
Growing up, did you find anybody as a look up to a factor or inspiration? Because for example, even I've become a host as a professional host, and I always admired watching a lot of these channel V's and MTVs when I was growing up in the 90s, and kind of an inspiration for me. And
Yeah.
I could speak well. That's all I could do, and so I ended up in this profession where I could speak. Get to speak, and for me, some of these journeys can be replicated for. But somebody who is going to, but as you aim to be a science scholar, very rare in the society where you find great scholars whom you can ape to as such. How easy and how tough was it for you to look up to somebody, or did you find your way all by yourself?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. You are absolutely right. I mean, unlike some other professions, it's very difficult to come across people who can be your role models if you really want to be an upstanding scientist. So obviously, the teachers start influencing you. So at least in the graduation level, some of my teachers had a lot of influence on me, as in how good they were in their fundamentals, how good they were in teaching things. So I actually kind of wanted to imbibe those kind of qualities. But then there used to be, I don't know if you remember, at least when I was growing up, there used to be a program on, at that time there was, cable television wasn't really popular. DD Doordarshan used to be there, and there used to be a program called Turning Point.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that shows my age.
Yes.
So Turning Point, I used to actually wait for them, and so Turning Point was hosted, at least to start with, it was hosted by Professor Yashpal. So Yashpal was a professor.
Oh, you have a very good memory, reminding me of the childhood.
Yeah, it's really beautiful time. So Yashpal, I didn't know at that time, was also a professor at TIFR. And there were a few times Professor MG came in, used to come on the show, same turning point as well. And I think once my father came across this, and so I was watching this, and he said, "Oh, I know this guy." So so it turned out we were very distant relatives. So
okay.
I think my father was related to him, very very distant. And when I think MGK kind of grew up in Kerala for a very brief period, and at that time I think my father knew him. So that kind of got stuck in my mind in some way. I wouldn't dare to say it was a role model as such, but I think I would say it was kind of an inspiration to seriously pursue science.
So, and once you have got to finish your PhD, and you were in Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and
Right.
which is based in Hyderabad. It's my city of Hyderabad. And how didn't we meet when you were in Hyderabad? So how was the experience here in Hyderabad?
Right. So at that time, I think I probably misled you initially. So when I joined TIFR, Tata Institute, Hyderabad campus wasn't there. So there was
Oh,
only the main campus of TIFR always has been in Mumbai,
Mumbai.
in
All right.
Navy Nagar. So that's where I did PhD. So Hyderabad campus is the newest one.
The new one.
Yeah, it just came up, back
So
in.
along with Baba Atomic Research Center and all TFR, all these
Correct.
campuses.
So yeah, so Baba Atomic Research Center always had a very close relationship with TIFR. In fact, BARC and to some extent actually the entire Department of Atomic Energy came
Right,
from TIFR. So TIFR was kind of the founding, the mother organization, if you will,
right.
for the atomic energy program in India. And then once it started becoming a programmatic research area for energy, as well as for non-civil applications. I mean, weapons, for example. Then it obviously couldn't be done in a fundamental research organization like TIFR. So
Right.
that got separated while Baba was still there.
So you're from Kerala. You get to finish your PhD in TIFR, and then you're part of this whole fundamental research institute as such. So then you chose the subject of lasers, and how you speak about it. All that I could understand about laser is when you go into a movie theater and some of these guys are scrolling these lasers onto the screen. That's all we understood about laser.
Yeah.
And very recently, when I'm trying to bridge to study and read some material that I probably get to have it, and nowadays the surgeries which are performed are usually on the laser technologies that we have used and thing. That's how advanced laser has begun, as such.
Yeah.
Were you keen to pursue laser technology, or it was just part of this transition of from research and all these things
Right.
that come?
So so this was uh, I would say almost accidental. So the way TIFR I think still works is that you have when you join TIFR, regardless of whether you join, I mean, now there are multiple campuses, of course, but regardless of where you join, the first year and year and a half, I would say, is mostly dedicated for coursework. So you have a graduate program, and it's quite it's quite dense, and it's quite stringent as well. So you have to learn sometimes even relearn some of these subjects into some extra depths. And then you have to give exams, and you have to get certain grades for you to continue in TIFR as well. So as part of towards the end of that period, you then start doing little projects in other labs. So you basically have a rotation. You go through various labs and do little projects in a few of them, in order for you to actually understand what actually research at the cutting edge really means. So you don't normally learn that kind of level when you're doing bachelor's or even master's, or even at the graduate level. You don't really fully appreciate what research actually means. So it's only when you start, going to the labs or starting to do some projects, you start appreciating what some of these things are. So one of the things, in my case, I was I did my projects in a few places in TIFR. So one of the things that really attracted me towards lasers was that they are really versatile tools. So you can actually use them to, for example, create the coldest temperature that you can imagine, that you can actually, yeah, you can get very close to absolute zero. And lasers can also be used to create the hottest temperatures that you can create on Earth. It's very close to actually sometimes even beyond temperatures that you will have at the center of sun, for example, millions of degrees Celsius.
Oh my God!
So same.
So this is the fact that China, as a recent article I have read, that they've created an artificial sun and all these things. So this is through courtesy to the laser technologies only.
No, so there are various ways to create extreme temperatures. It's essentially when you have high temperatures, matter exists in plasma state. So they don't, atoms don't remain as atoms. You have electrons and things like that coming out of atoms. You plug them out, so it kind of remains a hot soup of electrons and what is left of atoms, which is what we call ions. So there are various ways of creating them. You can use, for example, radio frequency waves to create them. Then when you have them, you have to use strong magnetic fields to contain them. There are, when you have lightning, for example, what you see is what you see as the light is coming from plasma. So this is not the only way to create hot temperatures, but in order to create energy, for example, through things like fusion, there are very few ways, and using lasers is one of the ways you can do that.
So now the work that you do in London or in Oxford is pertaining to do with advanced usage of laser technology for the utility of, and where are the avenues of usage that you are researching on right now?
Yeah, so what my work mainly concentrates on is to use lasers again to produce extreme temperatures on Earth, but to use it to speed up particles to very close to speed of light. So I don't know if you've heard of particle accelerators. Have you heard of?
I understand.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you must have heard of CERN.
Yes.
Yeah, and the Large Hadron Colliders. That's the that's the biggest particle accelerator on Earth.
Part of the confusion that I understand is because engineer myself, so we kind of learn these things in 11th, 12th, 8th, 9th, and I'm totally getting nostalgic because science I read back then. Of course, I didn't follow the profession that I was educated on. I ended up becoming the television and cinema. But I do understand whatever you speak. It's so very nostalgic, listening about radio frequencies and atoms and ions and electrons. And it's a very, very nostalgic conversation I'm having right now because it just took me 25 years back myself.
I love it that you can relate to it.
Kind of when I was doing my 11th and 12th standard and all these huge research laboratories at the school that we have had.
Yeah.
Getting all these odd kind of doing all these experiments that you want to do, and sometimes breaks the glass here and there, and what you do, and the
I've
lab
broken several
technician is
glasses in my
shouting
life.
at you that you've broken something, and all these things. So we kind of all these things, but these are things that you grew up learning, and all these things that
Absolutely. I mean, you can't learn anything without making a mistake. I've
right.
broken several things. I still do
Mm.
in experiments. Some of them
One of
were.
this I want to ask you the same thing is mostly people in India think a research guy is a crazy mad guy. The typical that word they use is a pagal आदमी है. Okay, कुछ तो बनाता रहता है, पागल
Yeah,
आदमी है, इसका
yeah,
दिमाग सही नहीं है.
yeah,
But in fact, that's a research work. Research is about you trying to ideate new capacitive things, new things, innovative things, many of them, because you cut about the rest.
yeah,
You are trying to build something that is cutting edge, new. So you are bound to have different mindset and technology. And very few parents understand that there is something called as this psychological. Some children have this psychological behavior where they're very inquisitive, innovative. They read a lot. They want to experiment with things, so small things. And I was once a child myself, trying to know many things. I had a lot of questions in me, and I wanted to get all these answers. So not every parent from any Indian household will understand this mindset of a child, because that's again child psychology. It's a different subject altogether. So
absolutely.
do we really have to have parents also being made understand about science and its utility, or any kind of, it could be any research, it could not just be science, it could be a research on socialness, it could be research on in my profession I call the research of camera technologies, or studio technology, which are again science-based electronic technology that we use to look an enhanced capacity of showcasing and broadcasting things. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's where I think one ought to start as well. So especially in the Indian setting, parents have a lot of influence on shaping up children's career. I think even now, I think it's slowly changing, but I would say by and large, they still play a significant role in, I would say, choosing careers for children. And I think that is partly to do with how the society always has been getting a safer job, having a steady income, having a significant standing in the society. All those things used to be, the priorities for pretty much everyone, partly because of our population, partly also, the economy never used to be that great, but now I think things are actually changing, but people still have this mindset, and you're totally right in saying that people don't know things beyond this bifurcation, medicine or in engineering. Now things like AI comes as a buzzword, so people go behind that. So I think it's important to actually educate parents about what are the opportunities. Why is it that it's important to study science? And once you study science, it's not necessary that everyone has to take PhD in science and then become a researcher. But studying science actually gives you a lot of skills. It gives you, for example, logical thinking. It'll give you a lot of tools that you can transfer to any career that you may want to take on later on. So I think that education needs to happen for parents at some stage.
I strongly believe that Because there's always a generation gap when a
Yeah.
child is born, when a parent has educated. It could be a 20, 30-year-old, or maybe in a 40-year gap that he must have studied some technology and that might not be relevant
Yeah.
to the present day
Yeah.
society. So as much as a child is being educated, even the parents should be put on awareness track, either
Yeah.
from the school or the society
Yeah.
or the civil society,
Yeah.
to get the balance of information. It kind
Yeah.
of just the know-how gap or the knowledge gap that we often tend to relate with the children and parents as such,
Yeah.
you know. In my case, you know, it was very difficult for me to make my parents understand that there's a
Yeah.
profession like what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
They will always feel that there's no
Yeah.
money in it, there's nothing much, but you know, I'm successful because I
Yeah.
hung on to
Yeah.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
profession.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Eh,
much the same situation that probably you or any average Indian is of the same.
Average Indian parents don't consider it. In my case, I think I was fortunate that my parents, because both of them had jobs, and I didn't have any uh, siblings. So you know, in the Indian setting, Indian way of saying is that I don't have responsibilities. So you know, they had salaries, they had pensions, so they were not really dependent on me in that way. So there's no need for me to, for example, you know,
So you could always experiment.
yeah, I had that freedom.
Right.
And equally, you're totally right. A lot of kids at my stage who were equally or probably even better than me didn't have those kind of social freedom uh, where you know, they could actually go and experiment something. So some of these things are purely serendipity, I think. So, but I think one of the things that I think we, as a society, now that you know, India is evolving, people are a little more aware. But in terms of awareness, for parents, I think is still fairly low because a lot of parents actually talk to me, either coming to me here, you know, even in UK, I would say that awareness is fairly low
Oh.
amongst Indian parents, and so you know, so it's true in India as well. So whenever I go home or you know, travel in India, a lot of people actually come to me and ask about career opportunities. So, and unfortunately, I don't think our media projects these things as well. So the research institutes, they do science awareness in terms of, but this is only, you know, in colleges and things
Limit,
like that.
limited to a certain section of the
Yeah,
audience.
limited to few sections, but this is not widespread in the society, and that level of awareness is, I think, is still lacking in. You're totally right, in India.
Yes, media does play an important role, and today we are glad that this show is actually highlighting many of these unsung heroes and work that you guys have done, which probably on the mainstream media would never have its place covered. That there's something like this happening, something like that society exists this way as such. So scientific temper, you know, how important is it for the growth of a nation? You know, I kind of been hearing about this word from my school that, you know, the, the best of the West countries have the great scientific temper. They're very research oriented. We would always see that America is 60 years ahead of us when we're growing up, and, you know, and then how Japan is so advanced in technology and how their whole mindset is scientifically driven and all these things for India to become a numero uno country. I mean, that's how the government wants it to project itself on 2047 as a developed country. How important is science and scientific temper and great product lines from science to build a great nation?
Yeah, so I think that's a fantastic question, and I think this is. I think you're kind of hitting the nail on its head. I think this is really important, or I would say even vital, for an advanced society to have that scientific temper at its core. So I think to that kind of stems from this curiosity, the curiosity that you mentioned. You were curious about how things work, and
Yeah.
curiosity often leads to questions, and question is what you really need whatever kind of questions, why is this working? Why is it this way? Can it be made better? That leads to technology. How is it working leads to science. So you need these kind of questions, and you need children capable of asking those questions, and you need teachers and parents encouraging children to ask these questions.
Okay.
And children shouldn't be afraid to ask these questions. That's kind of me for is a scientific temper. Now, if you the opposite side of that is that if you then point everything to things like religion and things like that, there are no questions. There are prescribed things that you just follow. No questions in them. So I think for an advanced society to evolve and develop your own science and your own technology, not just buy technology and copy that, but develop your own technology. This curiosity-driven education is important, and at the heart of it is the scientific temper.
There is, of course, this German technology, this Italian technology that goes in and machines, and there's the Japanese technology in electronics, and there's American technology in various other industrial technologies available as such. Where do you think India is behind in terms of this technology? What could be the factors, and what could be the whole nature of way that we start looking at developing one such brand equities, like how there's an American brand equity on certain this, you identify Germany with the machines, or motor automobiles, or heavy machines, or earth movers, kind of these things, and then you have the great car technologies from Korea or Japan. Now China is how whole Chinese society is so industrialized.
Yeah.
And the whole industrialization of Chinese society has driven into the whole modern perspective of how China is right now, and how they're competing, and they're so scientifically driven. Everything is scientifically driven in China right now, for a country which is much more poorer than us when it got its independence, and how it's going to go. And yes, there are some of these IT technologies where we are only a third-party implementator, but we are not the propagator of these technologies. Where do you think we need to take our steps now to compete on such level?
Yeah, I think you touched on a very very important topic, and this is something that is actually very close to my heart, and something that I've been urging people, my friends, my colleagues in India to take up some of these challenges as well. So I think, in my view, if you take, if you look back maybe 50, 60 years ago, even I would say right after First World War, how world dominance, if you look at which countries got dominance, you take Britain, for example, and then America, even in Germany. China wasn't in that picture at that time, obviously. How these powers they got dominance over the world, it was essentially through various versions of industrial revolution. So what they did right was they always had science, as in scientific thinking. They had science advances in their country, but they connected that with technology. So they actually started applying some of the science for the benefit of the society. So if you simple things like automation, mills, motor cars, all those things actually started having a big influence in how the society evolved, and obviously part of that reflected in warfare as well. But that's how the world dominance came in. People could, for example, cover continents without too much of a problem. They had navigation technology, they had radar. All those things came in that way. Now, India, I think in some way missed trick in this. So the same thing happened in China, as you rightly pointed out. So they were very poor. If you take 2030, maybe before the Chinese Revolution, Mao came into power. Before that, they were actually even at a lower keel compared to
The
what
country which is only based on agriculture.
yeah, mostly based on agriculture and some trade, but nothing else. So they started. I'm not saying that India takes the same path, but I'm saying they started investing in technology. Initially, they started by buying technology from West, and then they started, I would say, copying some of them. But then that led to ingenuity. So now some of the best technologies are actually made and invented in China.
Right.
So they started using their population to its strength. So this was the major keys. They knew their strength was their population. They started, they trained them. So you got a very well trained skill force who could actually not just duplicate technology, but also invent technology. Now, in India's case, I think we always had very good scientists. So from long time, I think we had a long heritage of good scientists. But some due to probably cultural reasons, they were concentrated in a few places, not widespread. I don't think science was ever a mainstay within the society. There were pockets where science was practiced, and they just remained pockets. And the other problem was that we never. It was partly, I think, I would say, fault of scientists as well. We maybe due to circumstances, we always thrived on the theoretical side. So where we didn't need many equipments, we only needed our mind and maybe some boards, and nowadays computers, something like that to imagine. So that's where we really thrive. We really had world-class scientists in India throughout. But again, as I said, not widespread, but in pockets. But this science never really talked to the market. It never really talked to industries. These things were never really like, there are obviously, exceptions, but like in the West, in several other countries, certainly like in China, these bridges were not very smooth between science and technology, and came to a point where nowadays, without the best technology, you can't really do the best science. So this is the trick I think we need to start doing in India. So whether we call it Make in India program or whatever name that you want to call, that transition from using the science into applications for the betterment of society. That's the bit that I think we are yet to master, and that might be that's in my view, that's one of the steps that we really need to take.
So I got a lot of insight from today on the information that you shelled out with, and I look forward to more of these heavy conversations that are very engaging. And I was just driven in nostalgia, understanding how so much about science, technology, the temper behind the science and technology. And yes, we do need a lot of heavy steps to be taken in India in building the bridge between industry and academicians. There should be a bridge between the scientific temper and the science, and the bridge of how parents and children should be made more aware about how science drives evolution of mankind, and how the best performing countries have adopted the greatest of the technologies. And these are things which has to be propagated, spoken into the world. And thank you for your evening, and I look forward to have more such healthy conversation in the near future with you. And from all of us here in India and on the XENA Star Salon 10th episode show, chat show, thank you very much, Rajeev ji.
Thank you.
If I can get the
Yeah. The pleasure was entirely mine. I think you were